All right, good morning. It's wonderful to have people here as part of our inaugural Zoom session of the Senator Harry Reid Civic Dialogue Program. At any point during Ambassador Verma's talk, please feel free to raise your hand, and Nakia Jackson-Hale will keep a queue of who's eager to chime in. I should say I'm Dan Hamilton. I'm Dean of the UNLV Boyd School of Law, and it's wonderful to have Ambassador Verma with us this morning. I'll just say very brief words and then hand it off to Senator Reid. Ambassador Verma was U.S. Ambassador to India from 2014 to 2017, where he led one of the largest diplomatic missions in the United States foreign policy portfolio. He previously was before that Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He also served for many years as the National Security Advisor to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He serves on the as an advisory board member to UNLV's own MGM Resorts Public Policy Institute here at UNLV. He's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and has several meritorious service decorations, and is the winner of the John Marshall Lifetime Achievement Award from the State Department, and has a doctorate from Georgetown University, and most importantly, his law degree from American University. So Ambassador Verma will be talking about the very interesting question today of restoring U.S. leadership in a post-COVID-19 world, where we're really going to examine sort of the international implications and international impact of COVID around the world, and how the United States plays a role in that. So with all that said, I would like to thank, of course, the creator of this series and a distinguished fellow at the UNLV Boyd School of Law, our great friend and supporter, Senator Harry Reid, for whom this Civic Dialogue Program is named, and who has long worked with Ambassador Verma. So I'm going to hand it off to Senator Reid. Thank you for being with us today, Senator.
Dean, thank you very much. We all lament the fact that we can't be together personally, but we've all learned that this Zoom and other magic of new technology allows us to get together. Rich Verma is truly one of my favorite alumni. Rich worked for me, and I guess the most important thing to say about him, one thing we always found in Congress, as we find in the business community, is people can see talent. And it didn't take long before people were envious of my foreign policy advisor, Rich Verma. People saw the work that he was doing for me in various meetings, committee meetings and others. People felt this man has a lot of knowledge, and he really does. I enjoyed working with him, and to me, it also, every day I'm fascinated by the strength and vigor of our country as a result of immigration. Rich's parents immigrated from India, and if you look around, you know, every place you go, we see America strengthened by virtue of our immigration policy. I mean, I look here at home, my wife's dad, my father-in-law immigrated from Russia. It's amazing what takes place in America and the strength we get from this immigration. That's why it so troubles me to have this administration in many ways denigrating immigration and using it as a wedge to try to minimize the strength that comes from immigration. So Rich, I'm very happy you're here with us by virtue of great technology. You are someone that is admired by many. The work that you did for me, I started to say that people saw how good you were, one of whom was Senator Clinton before she became Secretary of State. Once she became Secretary of State, she stole you from me. And I was very happy to be part of that transaction. You honored me and you honored her by the terrific job you did as Assistant Secretary of State. Then to be selected to go to your parents' birthplace and become ambassador to that country was really something that is really moving, at least to me, to show how our country is so good that you could come back to your parents' place of birth and that huge embassy we have there, do some tremendously important diplomatic issues for the country. You know, India is an important part of the world, and we watch the struggles that they have with a huge population and the largest democracy in the country, in the world, I'm sorry. And the largest Muslim population in the world is in India, and they've been able to navigate the fact that we have such a large Muslim population there, and there's been a little bit of friction in recent weeks, but I think it's going to be short-lived. So, Rich, I want everyone within the sound of my voice to understand that you are someone that is knowledgeable about foreign affairs and the way Washington works, and we're all happy to have you here. Please go ahead, Rich.
Senator, thank you. Thank you so much. And to Dean Hamilton and to UNLV and Senator Reid, thank you for inviting me. I hope you can hear me okay, and it's grateful to see everybody on the screen. And to Senator Reid, let me just say up front, you were the best boss I've ever had. The 5.5 years that I spent working for you, when you were whip, when you were the Senate Minority Leader, when you were the Senate Majority Leader, were some of the best years of my professional life. From a national security perspective, we were confronting the issues of our time, the aftermath of 9/11, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, domestic surveillance, the war on terror, Guantanamo, you name it. And we were navigating all the big and complex issues of the day. And Senator, you were at the forefront of those debates. And I was really lucky to be by your side. I had promised that I would not tell my favorite Senator Reid stories, but I have to tell at least two. We were able to travel the world together, from South America to Israel and the West Bank, Kuwait, Baghdad, Ukraine, and so much more. I got to attend every meeting that Senator Reid had with every foreign leader who visited the Senate. He was always the same Harry Reid with world leaders as he is with all of you in Nevada, and all of us, tough and funny, clear, relentlessly fighting for what was right, no matter what the cost. And hardworking. Geez, what can I say about the work ethic other than there was no downtime? And all of the Reid alumni of that time were trained to keep our Blackberries close for fear of missing a text, an email, a phone call which could come at any hour. I will never forget the day that my first child, Zoe, was born. And I was in the delivery room with my wife, who had just gone into labor, when the phone rang, and there was Senator Reid on the phone. I said, Senator, I'm in the delivery room with Pinky. Can I give you a call back? And he proceeded to wish my wife all the best and then ask me a number of questions over the next 15 minutes. My wife will never forget that moment, that's for sure. But there was no better boss, no better mentor, no better advocate for the underserved of our nation. And he taught me what it means to be part of a team and the importance of supporting each other. I don't know, Senator, if you'll remember this story, but I recall soon after you were elected Democratic leader, a group of national security officials, former national security officials, came in to meet with you to let him know that he now needed a real foreign policy staff, and that they had never heard of Rich Verma. he should hire a general or a retired diplomat to handle the foreign policy and security issues. The senator called me into his room after that meeting to let me know what this group of wise former officials had recommended. That was it, I thought. My time was over. And the senator said to me, quote, "I told them no thanks. I've got my guy, and that guy is Rich Verma." And he stuck with me, and I've stuck with him ever since. He was there sitting next to me at my 2 Senate confirmation hearings and moving my nominations for assistant secretary and ambassador faster than I deserved. And on my last day as a Reid staffer, he called me into his office. We talked for a while. He gave me a big hug, wished me well, turned and walked off. No looking back, no regrets, just the same old Harry Reid, a fighter who I greatly admire and respect. So Senator, thank you for everything that you've done for the country, and thank you for what you've done for me personally. So on to the subject at hand. As you know, the title of this talk is Restoring U.S. Global Leadership in a Post-COVID World. But as we all know, we don't actually live in a post-COVID world. We are living through, in many ways, the worst of the pandemic now. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers with you because they are grim. But as you know, we have 4% of the world's population, yet 25% of the world's cases. And we lead the world in new cases and deaths. As Dr. Fauci has said, it doesn't make much sense to talk about the second wave, as we are still very much in the throes of the first wave. As President Trump's own former Homeland Security advisor, Tom Bossert, recently noted, we are creating a new Wuhan each and every day. How we got here is probably not as complicated as we sometimes make it. I've been focused on what I've been calling the 3 isms: federalism, populism, and individualism. Just explain this briefly. Our federal system of shared power between the central and state governments has been a model for nations around the world. It can be efficient and tailored to address local needs and concerns. The state and local governments in California certainly govern on a different set of priorities than, say, Kansas or Wyoming, and that's how it should be. But when a crisis hits the nation and national leaders punt the response back to the states and localities, you end up with the mess we have today. 50 different approaches, 50 different standards, 50 different success and failure rates. The opening of schools and colleges and universities this fall will bring into sharp focus the failure to have uniform guidance from our national government. Populism brings yet another complex dynamic with its inherent distrust of government institutions, the disdain for expert opinion, and an inherent skepticism around science. We've seen this with the climate change skeptics, but COVID-19 brings all 3 vulnerabilities to the fore as populist politicians and their followers reflexively reject the recommendations, say, from a Centers for Disease Control or a National Institutes for Health. And that leads me to individualism. It sits at the heart of our country's formation. Individual liberties are enshrined in our founding documents, but taken too far, these can also be taken to extremes, negating any sense of social compact or societal obligation, leading to anti-government sentiment and even militia and extremist movements, which reject any government constraint on an individual liberty. Just look at the debate we're having over masks through this prism. And so the virus has laid bare our fault lines and vulnerabilities, hitting the elderly, minorities, and communities with weak public health infrastructure particularly hard. At the start of this crisis, just think about it, the world's superpower did not have enough masks for its healthcare workers. And we had to plead with other nations not to shut off the supply of critically needed supplies and drugs. And while other nations in Asia, like South Korea and even China, and nations in Europe have gotten control of the spread of the virus, we remain in its grip, waiting and hoping for the curve to flatten and for the virus to, quote, fade away, as the president has suggested, and we keep waiting. Now, just as the pandemic has exposed and laid bare America's vulnerabilities and shortcomings, it has done the same to the global system and international order as well, ravaging global economic, health, and education systems. Let me just take you through a few of the very depressing numbers. The International Monetary Fund projects a nearly 5% downturn in global GDP, the sharpest decline since the Great Depression. The global tourism sector will lose somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion, depending on the length of the pandemic. The UN's World Food Program is preparing to ramp up food assistance to 140 million people, the most since 1961, as food insecurity grows. Women and girls will be disproportionately impacted by the virus in many ways. Secondary schooling for 10 million girls will be ended or seriously delayed, according to the Malala Fund. Modeling done by the UN predicts that a 6-month interruption in health services and treatments caused by COVID could result in an additional 500,000 deaths from AIDS and related diseases in Africa just over the next year. The world will grow more dangerous too, as the virus destabilizes already weak governments and security forces, giving extremist groups the operating space to grow and the conditions in which to recruit the frightened and the desperate. We see growing domestic unrest from the Middle East to Central Africa and South Asia, and anti-immigrant and anti-government groups growing in numbers and power, further upsetting security conditions. As a recent Council on Foreign Relations study notes, quote, "This plague puts immense strain on individual governments. It divides societies and exacerbates societal inequalities. It encourages leaders to act unilaterally and nationally rather than in concert. It demonstrates the weaknesses of most international organizations. It exacerbates tensions between the US and China. It prompts US adversaries to try to take advantage of Washington's tardy and confused reaction to the epidemic." And look, to be clear, the international system was already under great duress because of American retrenchment. We were the leader of the system for the past 7 decades, but we not only withdrew from our traditional role, we have been actively working to undermine the systems and architecture we had put in place. Author and TV host Reid argues that the greatest threat to the democratic order is actually the United States, as it goes about weakening and upending the alliances and norms that are required for peace and stability and standards in international life. And here I think it's important to pause and reflect on how much we have undone the past 3.5 years. Virtually no US allied partner or multilateral system or organization has escaped the American assault. Let me give you a few examples. On trade, we quickly withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and set in motion the destruction of the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement mechanisms. On human rights, we exited the Human Rights Council, and recently we've even imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court. On climate, we withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and dismantled each of America's commitments to keep the planet from warming another 2 degrees. On non-proliferation and arms control, we withdrew from the Iran Nuclear Agreement, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, the Open Skies Treaty, and have begun the process of withdrawing from the New START Treaty from Russia, leaving both the Iranians and the Russians emboldened, not to mention the North Koreans, who show no sign of slowing nuclear or missile production. And just with regard to Iran, since leaving the Iran agreement, Iran has reportedly tripled its stockpile of enriched uranium, breached its commitments on heavy water for plutonium, and is now less than a year from a bomb. And on global health, the subject we're here discussing today, we announced last week our exit from the World Health Organization at a time of a gripping global crisis. Now, this is already on top of berating our longstanding allies, demanding they pay us more, as if we are a hired security contractor instead of allies united by common values. Take the case of South Korea, where the White House demanded that Seoul pay an additional 400% to the US Treasury, and if they did not, we would pull out US troops, which is only music to the ears of North Korean officials. And even our established mechanisms like the G7 are being tossed aside in favor of new arrangements to include and benefit Moscow. At the last meeting of the G7, the situation was so bad that the grouping could not agree on a comprehensive response to the pandemic because we, the United States, has demanded that the virus be called the Wuhan virus instead of COVID-19. At the last two global summits to raise money to combat COVID-19, the US government was not present. This is what US leadership looks like on the global stage today. And it has certainly had an impact on the ability to get things done and on our global standing. According to a recent Pew Center survey, the number of people around the world with confidence in America had fallen from 74% under President Obama to just under 31% under President Trump. More people expressed confidence in Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping than they did in the American president. And that was in January before the pandemic. Now, in President Trump's defense, he will say he was elected by an American public that was war weary, tired of overseas commitments, frustrated by bad trade deals, and exploited by so-called allies, America first. Fair enough. But this was not a reset or a rebalance of US obligations. What has occurred has been a dismantling of the underpinnings of the liberal democratic order that we had built, shaped, and led since the end of World War II. These set of American actions also exposed the weaknesses in the system when the pandemic came to life. No one was home to respond. Now, for the American people and for the world, this has been such a departure from our longstanding role. Following World War I, it was US leadership that attempted to build post-war institutions to keep the peace. And again, following World War II, it was President Roosevelt, along with our allies, that would construct the post-war architecture, the rules and norms, in addition to the Atlantic and Pacific Alliance system. The result was a sharing of power among the players in the system that agreed to play by the rules. And again, following the Cold War in 1989, the United States emerged as the unipolar power, but we did not seek to gain more territory or exploit other nations. We, in fact, gave up accumulated power. We sought to distribute it across the international system to build a more durable order. Now, while these are broad macro examples of US global leadership, we have more recent examples of US leadership on pandemics, including SARS and on Ebola. The New York Times in 2003 reports on SARS, quote, "The public health officials from coast to coast have cited good planning and timely communication between federal and local officials as part of the reason the disease has not hit the United States harder. The US adopted aggressive public health measures, worked closely with the WHO, and we adopted a very conservative case definition, allowing for the early isolation of individuals, and we contained the virus." And a decade later with Ebola, the United States coordinated global and domestic response. We worked closely with the UN to deploy resources to the hardest hit areas. We deployed DoD assets early. We organized nationwide detection and surveillance testing, and we made preparations for passenger screening. We've got the muscle memory to do this. The question is, do we have the will? And here I would say political leaders may be misreading the electorate. While the American electorate may not want to get involved in everyone's overseas problems, they don't want us shrinking from the world either. A 2019 Chicago Council on Global Affairs poll finds nearly 70% of Americans want the United States to play an active role in world affairs. If you read that in conjunction with other polling showing large segments of the electorate dissatisfied with the handling of the coronavirus, and some 67% of the country saying we are on the wrong track, I would submit to all of you and any political leaders, what do we have to lose? The American people want action, and they want us to lead our way out of this crisis, and that will require global leadership. So what can we do? Let me mention 3 specific steps. First, we have to build a global pandemic response system. We know by now that what happens in a wet market in faraway district in China can have global ramifications, with a virus leaping from animals and spreading in a highly efficient and lethal way. One only has to go back to the end of February when we were looking at news reports coming out of China. This was an Asian problem. We had less than 10 reported cases at the time. The events have moved fast. We were not ready. We need to be ready for the next one, and we don't have the luxury to wait until this one is defeated. So just as President Wilson did before World War I was over, and just as President Roosevelt did prior to the end of World War II, we can start planning to ensure we are ready and that the international system is ready to do battle with a future pandemic. We should have common and coordinated efforts on vaccine development and deployment, and that includes agreed upon pricing and delivery models. We need to ensure that supply chains of vital drugs and medical goods are protected from any one country's export control restrictions. We should be working together on research, testing, and improving our global health security and monitoring systems. We should be looking for ways to reform and strengthen the WHO, not trying to undermine or break it. We need global early detection and reporting, not just in one country, but a truly international information sharing network. That system was supposed to exist today, but it obviously broke down. We need testing, contact tracing, and containment measures that are widely adopted globally, not just in a handful of countries. We can't afford to have a weak link in pandemic response, as this virus and future viruses are going to look for that weakness in the system. All of this will take resources, the best science, research, and innovation, and yes, it will require the United States to step up and meet this challenge head on. Building a wall, cutting off international travel, or refusing to process visas is not a strategy. It didn't work this time. It won't work next time either. We can do so much better. Second thing we have to do, we have to ready the international system for other transnational threats. So what we're talking about today are transnational threats, those risks to public safety that know no boundary or that cannot be easily limited to the boundaries of a single nation state. Pandemics are just one of the many transnational threats that confront us. Since 9/11, we have prepared for others, namely terrorism. We led a global coalition to go after Al-Qaeda. We set up aggressive monitoring systems. We bolstered our military capabilities and homeland defenses. We revised our legal authorities to discover covert planning and terror cells. We didn't do everything right, far from it, but we took a lead role. We worked with friends, partners, and foes to ensure we greatly reduced the risk of another attack on the homeland. And beyond terrorism, we have other transnational threats to deal with, like climate change and cyber attacks. And of course, on climate, we've ceded the field. China is now the world's largest renewable energy producer, spawning new economic opportunities and a healthier way of life for tens of millions of its people. Again, political leaders think they have read the tea leaves here correctly on what the American people want when it comes to climate change, but they've got it wrong. Nearly 2/3 of Americans say the federal government should act aggressively to combat climate change. And just as many say the problem is already affecting their communities according to a recent Pew Center report. Now, this is up from 40% viewing it as a serious threat just a decade ago. And on cyber security, as one national commission recently found, the COVID-19 outbreak has been a stress test for the national crisis management system, and that system has failed. And as we exit the global stage, Russia is pushing for a UN framework on cybercrime that, you guessed it, would benefit Russia, China, and other authoritarian regimes as we watch from the sidelines. One could hardly imagine an Eisenhower or a Reagan or a Bush 41 allowing the world to be shaped around them while they sat idly by. There are, of course, other threats that transcend nations and borders, but if we can build a system to deal with pandemics, climate, terrorism, and cyber threats, we will be in a much stronger position than where we are today. And finally, and I'll end here and I look forward to your questions, we need renewal here at home. It's difficult to persuasively argue to the American people that we need to do more abroad as their own domestic situation worsens. As we noted here, the pandemic has put American flaws on display for all the world to see. Income inequality, racial divisions, poor health infrastructure, weak federal leadership, fragile economic conditions, and so much more. And of course, we can't fix everything overnight. And look, I'm not someone who believes in American decline. We are still the world's largest economy, with the world's largest military, with the best universities, the best scientists, teachers, and with a population that knows how to get hard things done the right way. So I am a believer in America and in Americans, but if we are going to be a player on the world stage, we need to do some things differently. That means if we want to win this era of great power competition, particularly with China, we need to out-innovate, out-educate, and outperform our peers. China has more than quadrupled the number of undergraduate science and engineering degrees granted by its universities. In purchasing power, parity power terms, China has surpassed the United States in economic power. Its military and diplomatic corps are now the world's second largest. China has more megacities, more internet users, more college graduates than any other nation. China leads the world in infrastructure investment and renewable energy use. I could go on, but you get the point. If we really want to take on China and win, that contest starts here at home, and we are unlikely to secure any kind of victory just through the imposition of agricultural tariffs, which are paid for by US farmers and consumers. And rather than exit or upend the international system, China has skillfully used the system to its advantage, staying in key environmental agreements and UN institutions, shaping the system to its advantage. As one strategic scholar said, quote, China is seeing its best strategic opportunity since the Cold War. Meanwhile, here in the US, as we exit the global order and its architecture, we are simultaneously rejecting new talent from across the globe, castigating immigrants, and massively slashing our smart power assets in diplomacy and development with no tangible means to compete more broadly in Asia and other parts of the globe. We have to do better. A new and modern social compact on domestic renewal in all sectors, in our infrastructure and in our government capacity is a must if we want to regain our international position. So in conclusion, we are interconnected like never before. But we no longer have to imagine what life is like if we cut ourselves off from the world. We've seen what that's like for the past 4 months. No travel, no interaction with foreigners, little trade, no joint research or innovation, no joint productions of art, music, cinema, no common defense to our challenges, no common celebration of advancements in science or human understanding. Just every man and woman for themselves and every nation for itself. A world with greater competition and less cooperation. It is not a very gratifying way to live. It is not a prosperous way to live. It's not where our future lies. We can get this back on track, but it will require drawing upon that uniquely American spirit, the one that has led the way to greater peace and stability for so many around the world for so many years. We've done it before. It's imperative we do it again. So, Dean,
Hey, Rich, listening to you, one of the things that your terrific remarks bring to my mind is the strength of the president. We have three separate and equal branches of government. But if one of those get allowed a kilter, it throws off the whole system. And there's no doubt in my mind that Trump has not maintained the power of the presidency. And what he has done with it is negative, not positive. So I would hope that we understand that one of the ways to get back on track is to look forward to the election in November. I think that it's going to be a real change election. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to take the Senate seat in Colorado. I think we'll have really a good chance in Montana. We're going to win in Maine. We're going to win in Arizona. We're going to win in North Carolina. And we have shot at races in one of them in Georgia for sure. And there are some outlying states that are possible. Alaska, even Kansas. It's hard for me to say that, but maybe even Kansas. So I think this is going to be a change election. And when that change takes place, you're going to see the power of our government in a constructive way rather than the destructive way that we've seen for the last 3.5 years. This is going to go down in history as one of the low points of America because we have been opposed to everything. Anything Obama did, he tried to get rid of, including one of the most important pieces of legislation passed in the history of the country, the Affordable Care Act. So I certainly do hope that we can look forward to a new day. As Pete Seeger, the folk singer, said, I can see a new day soon to be where the storm clouds have all passed in a world that is free. I really believe that's going to happen.
Great remarks, Senator. Appreciate that. I couldn't say anything better than what you just said. Thank you. What's interesting, though, I would say, that what's happened over the last 3.5 years has just been such a departure. And I purposely referenced Reagan, Bush, and Eisenhower.
Yes.
To let people know that I really am not trying to be a partisan here as much as, it sounds like. I am trying to suggest to people that this is such a departure from America's role. And I don't think this is what the American people asked for. And clearly I think they're frustrated by what they've seen play out.
Rich, I'm really, I believe in the two-party system. It's the strength of this country. We don't have a lot of minor parties like they have many other places. But I think Trump has really, really damaged the Republican brand. And that's why you see not Democrats, but Republicans running these tremendously effective ads against President Trump. Republicans are doing it because they know that he has terribly damaged their brand. And I look forward to the new administration, which will strengthen the two-party system. I've been disappointed big time about how the Republican senators have just cowered at anything that President Trump does. They have nobody other than Mitt Romney standing up for what is right.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ambassador. So we have time for questions and comments. So you can raise your hand in the raise your hand feature, which is on the participant list, or you can just literally raise your hand on the screen and I will see you and call on you in that, or try to call on you in that case. And I see people out there who I know must have views, Jim Thompson and Bill Curran and John Delikanakis law students, Radhika. So by all means, please chime in. So Radhika Kannal, you want to go first? Go ahead, Radhika. We'll try to unmute you.
All right, I got that. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you guys again. I have a question, comment, scenario, I suppose. Having been in the political world kind of recently joined in my district, I see two different groups. A group of Republicans that are already supporting Democrats and want to change and are rational, or in one sense, are ready for a conversation, or ready to come to the middle ground and have a conversation, appreciating the fact that we can have different opinions. But there is another group that's completely walled off themselves. There is no conversation, there's no opportunity to even acknowledge that rest of the country is on a different platform. I was wondering if anyone, either the senator or Mr. Verma, would have any thoughts on how would we come to work on these issues on a very low level, down the ballot kind of situation. How do we work this with your neighbors, with your within your community, and things of that nature? But by the way,
thank you, Radhika, who has just, I think, going to move on to the general election for her assembly district. Is that right?
Sir, yes, sir.
Proud graduate of the Boyd School of Law. Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you. And I am in a Republican-leaning district, just to give you a context.
And I should say I'm a single issue voter. It's all Boyd all the time.
Thank you.
Senator, you want to take that one? I mean, I will. Maybe I'll just say I think I think there are, as Senator Reid said, the two-party system is a great hallmark of the country. I watched Senator Reid work across the aisle every day to get things done. But Radhika, I think what you're describing is a group of people who may not want to work constructively at all and who view compromise as somehow, a negative thing. And there are many disincentives to compromise. The amount of money that people have to raise, they think they'll, the social media platforms, the commentary on cable news. And so people get scared to come to the middle to find solutions, but we've got to figure out ways to re-incentivize that. But I'm talking with a guy who has done that his whole life. So Senator, over to you for this is a tough question.
Well, Rich, I think that I really look at Nevada as a state that is doing the right thing. We have the only state in the union where a majority of the assembly and the Senate are women. That's remarkable. That's great. We have our court system, Supreme Court, majority is women. So we're really, I think, have shown the rest of the country that the movement of Nevada in these very difficult times has been forward, not backwards. I think one reason is because of the vitality of our state legislature.
Thank you, Senator. So we're fortunate to have Jim Thompson with us today, who is past president of the Rand Institute in California and a great authority on foreign policy himself. So Jim, I know you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, well, I have a question for Rich Verma. But before that, though, I just want to comment on the issue of how do we go forward from here. And I just want to, I'm of the belief that it's going to be very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to foreign policy, our relationship with our allies and so forth. Our allies have now seen that our political system can produce a populist and an isolationist. And it's been true that these kinds of political ideologies have been existing in the United States, but administrations in the past, even if they campaign with some isolationist rhetoric, usually governed as internationalists, are always governed as internationalists. And that changed this time, and I'm afraid that people are going to worry about long-term commitments with the United States as a consequence of having seen these last 4 years. But let me get to my question. That is, obviously you're an expert on India, having been our ambassador there for 3 years. And so one international leader that seems happy with the United States is is Modi. And, you know, he even went to a Trump rally in Texas. And so, you know, how do you...
Is who?
Prime Minister Modi.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Prime Minister Modi, yeah. So what do you see going forward for the relationship between the U.S. and India, especially if there is a change in administration in Washington?
Yeah, great question. And just one minor kind of clarification on your question. The rally in Houston was actually a rally of the Indian American community, which Trump invited himself
Right.
to attend. So it
Right.
was kind of an interesting reversal. Look, I would say a few things. The U.S.-India relationship is not very old. It's only 72 years old. And we started off really strong. Eisenhower and Kennedy were great believers in the relationship. Boy, they were fully committed. Eisenhower was the first one to go there. Kennedy committed arms to India when Chinese troops were coming over the border. And then we went into a long period of estrangement. Johnson, Nixon, Carter, continuing through, and then it just got kind of no progress through the Reagan and Bush administrations. And that part of our history still hangs over us. In fact, the Nixon chapter was so bad that a lot of the Indian diplomats and political figures you talk to will start the conversation, you know, with you about what happened in 1971 and, you know, go their way forward. So we shouldn't forget that we've got some skeletons in the closet that keep our relationship from, I think, excelling to where it could go. Having said that, the last 2 years of the Clinton administration forward, you know, I say to people, if U.S. India was a stock and you bought it in the year 2000, you'd be in a really good place today, because we've gone decidedly upward through Republican and Democratic administrations. And I'd say we've come together on 3 different vectors. One is just we're united on these shared values of social justice. We're united on democracy, and we're now united on this notion of a free and open Indo-Pacific, establishing a democratic order. This is not an anti-China coalition. And so what it does is it helps us get through, whether you're Republican or Democratic president or a BJP or a Congress prime minister, you plow through all the noise of the politics. And that's why the relationship has prospered. And finally, I would say there's 4 million Indian Americans in the United States now at all levels. When I started working on Capitol Hill, there were only a handful of Indian American staffers. We now have 5 Indian American members of Congress. So that also helps drive the relationship forward. So I'm pretty optimistic about where we will head into the future. And I think it's going to be one of the most consequential relationships of this century. No question in my mind.
Rich, while we were working together, one of the things, maybe small in the overall scheme of things, but it was important to do at the time, is the deal we made on nuclear with
Right.
India. That was came at a time where they really appreciated it.
Well, it was a huge deal, and it was such a departure, right? Here was a non-declared nuclear weapons state that wanted to trade civil nuclear power, parts, technology with the rest of the world. And so we had to change US law. We had to get the international community to go along with it. But I remember your support, then Senator Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Biden's support was critical. That was a really important time, and things like that really do help us get over what Prime Minister Modi calls those hesitations of history.
Thank you.
I have another meeting at noon, so Rich, you answer questions. There are going to be some good ones. Dean, thank you very much for you taking charge of this meeting now.
Thank you, Senator.
Everybody.
Great.
Thank you so much, Senator. Be
Take
well.
care.
So next we have Professor Mary Beth Beasley.
Thank you, and thank you, Ambassador Verma and departing Senator Reid. We appreciate your time and your insights very much. I guess when I think of the COVID crisis, it's certainly, unlike many crises in American history, a truly international one. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how the UN, WHO, and other international organizations have worked or not worked. Are they, and are those positive or negative results systemic, individual failings of people in leadership positions, or are they political problems of the major nation states? Like I can think of one that other countries are isolating right now. What do you think, if anything, has to change in those international organizations before the next pandemic?
Yeah, I think, look, you wouldn't give them high marks for how they performed. They performed poorly and did not respond the way they should. And clearly the missteps at the WHO on how it was reporting, you know, when I talk about how we need an international reporting system to get the information out to countries quickly, that system was supposed to exist, was supposed to be managed by the WHO, and they bungled it at the beginning. And so we have to hold them accountable. But holding them accountable, we don't do that by taking our ball and going home. I don't know how we deal with the next pandemic. Do we want to stand up our own WHO? Do we want to just deal with countries that we like? I mean, we've got to figure out how to strengthen the system and improve it. And that means working with everybody, because there will be another pandemic. There will be another crisis of global magnitude. And as I said, I think the first thing I said about what we need to do, we don't have a global pandemic response, a true global pandemic response system. You know, the fact that we still are short of supplies, the fact that we are still short of vital drugs, I mean, that's, you know, we're in an exceptionally vulnerable position. So there's a lot we have to do, but honestly, it can't get done by any other country. We're going to have to really do this and take a leadership role in it.
Thanks.
I saw that Robin Walker had a question. Robin,
Hi, Ambassador Verma. Thanks so much for your remarks there. I learn something every time I talk to you.
Hey, Robin.
Hey, good to hear from you. Hope you're holding up well. My question was actually similar to Jim Thompson's, but then he kind of veered in a different direction, which was also interesting. But as far as putting the toothpaste back in a tube, I tend to agree with that our allies and partners around the world are going to be wary of us seeing that the rug can get pulled out from under them again. And so we'll take some different actions and hedge their bets a little bit more than they will in the past. So my question that he didn't really address there or get to was, how does the next administration, hopefully a Biden administration, go about rebuilding or building a new international system, including the financial system, including everything else? I think that has to be one of the priorities of a new administration, is working towards something that's productive as opposed to trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Thanks so much.
Great question. And for those of you that don't know, Robin's a great public servant and served the country for many years. So I would just say that we have to do a lot of listening. We have to do a lot of repair work. But we can't just go back to the old system, right? Our alliances are critically important, and they ultimately protect and preserve U.S. interests. But part of the reason there was fraying of our international system to begin with was the fact that a lot of other countries had lost faith in international institutions. So you can imagine if you're India or Brazil or South Africa or Japan, and you don't have a seat on the UN Security Council, or you're not, if you're in the global South and you're not invited to a G7 or a G8. So I think we also need to really relook at the international institutions, right? So if we built the institutions after World War II, and we largely, the victors of World War II, largely designed them, let's be honest, they were designed for our advantage, and we should be honest about that. We're in a new era. We're in a new century. Those institutions have not been updated, and we need to update them and make sure they are more reflective of a broader group of concerns. So I don't think it's just a matter of going around the world and listening to people and saying, we're here for you. We've got to really demonstrate that we're here. But I also think we have to reshape the institutions for the modern era and to deal with the kinds of threats we're facing today. And obviously we're not prepared for that. These institutions are meant to deal with nation states and traditional kind of what I would say now anarchic type problems. And we've got to be able to figure out how to move much faster and with a broader group of countries.
Thank you. I saw that John Delikanakis had a question. Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you. You know, I've read that China has a 1,000-year plan, and as best I can see, we don't have a plan with regard to China. So what advice would you give to a new president with regards to China as a broad policy approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. Not only do we not have a 1,000-year plan, we may not have a 1,000-day plan. So look, I think I talked about it as the last point I was mentioning, this notion of American renewal. And I'm not someone who believes that we have to enter a Cold War period with China. China's a competitor. It's an economic competitor. Yes, it's a security competitor. But we've got to be able to solve a lot of problems with China too. We've got to be able to solve issues of terrorism, issues of climate change, issues of non-proliferation. We need China's help on North Korea. So we've got to be able to work with China, trade with China, and compete with China. Now, look at what China is doing. We complain a lot about Belt and Road. We complain a lot about all the investments they're making from East Africa through the South China Sea. But what have we done to compete against that? The answer is very, very little. So we really need to step up our game. We've been trying to cut our diplomatic force while China's increased theirs. We've been trying to cut our development budget and our development officers while China has increased theirs. We've been trying to cut our funding of higher education while China has increased its funding. We've been trying to cut our infrastructure spending while China has increased. I could go on through the list. Now that's no way to win, whether you want to call it a Cold War or a competition, whatever frame you want to call it. If we continue on that path, then we can give up the mantle. And so I think the strategy with China is a strategy that starts in the four corners of the United States. And so domestic renewal, followed by a lot of work with our friends and partners in the region.
Thank you. So we are almost out of time. So if there's any last questions out there, please raise your hand or wave, and I will try to see you. And I think that, okay. So as we sign off, Ambassador, what are some reasons, I know you touched on this at the end of your talk, but what are potential reasons for optimism as you look forward? These are tough times. So what do you think is something we can take away where we can feel some measure of hope in let's say even the short term? Yeah,
I just think we have to be reminded about all the good that we do and have done in the world. And I think I've had this privileged perch to serve abroad in an embassy where I got to see every asset of our United States government at work. I got to see the 18-year-old Marines standing out guard, willing to sacrifice themselves for the safety of the Americans behind that wall. And these were Marines that came, most of them probably didn't speak English as a first language, came from all over the world. I saw what our development experts do. I saw what a little science and technology can do to change people's lives. So we have this enormous ability to do good. And we can get back to that. I think it's part of the American spirit. And so once we get through, I think, some of our own internal crises where we attack each other too much, it's good to have political fights. It's good to have policy disagreements, but we need to rise above it and we need to get back to the spirit of what this country was built on, and try to create better days for our population, and then reclaim that leadership role abroad as well. So I am optimistic if we can do the right thing in the next few months, and we'll see what happens.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ambassador Verma. Thank you, Senator Reid. Thank you all for joining us in the Senator Harry Reid Civic Dialogue program series. We will keep doing these throughout the summer and throughout the school year, and before too long, we'll be doing it in person. So please join me in thanking Ambassador Verma for very thoughtful and engaging remarks today. Thank you, Ambassador.
Great, thanks so much, appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Very good. So have a good day and be well.
Take care.